Salut, c'est Géraldine. We had a party at my co-working space here in Grenoble last week, and I rented a fantastic princess dress. So I thought that's a perfect opportunity to do an episode on fairy tales in French. We call them les contes de fées, or just les contes for tales, les contes de fées, or les contes. So yeah, let's do that. Let's dive in. I picked a couple of fairy tales, especially ones written in French, not just French translations. And we are going to start with La belle l'histoire du prince de Motordu. It's this one. I love it. I already talked about it in an episode about books for children, I think. But I love it so much that even I enjoy reading it. So it's not necessarily just for children. La belle l'histoire du prince de Motordu. It's by Pef, who both wrote the story and also did the drawings. So he's super talented. La belle l'histoire du prince de Motordu, as you probably kind of guess, doesn't mean anything as a title. Why? Because the prince who is here doesn't really get how words work in French. So instead of saying La belle histoire, he says La belle l'espoir, which kind of sound the same but doesn't mean anything. But the funny thing is, because he doesn't get the words right, he makes the reality as he thinks is. So this prince doesn't live in un château, he lives in un chapeau, which is a hat. And un château is a castle, but they sound very, very close. So he has a castle made as a hat. And it's like that for during all the contes. For example, he doesn't have une salle à manger, which is a dining room, une salle à manger, but he has une salle à danger, a danger room. So as you can hopefully see, there are lots of dangers in his living dining room. There's a massive crocodile, there's a waterfall, there's a trap, there's a dragon, and it's like that for all the book, and that's why it's so nice for children, because he kind of gets French, but he doesn't totally get it. And one day he meets a princess. That's the princess. And the princess is called La Princesse des Écoles. La Princesse des Écoles. And she kind of falls in love with him, and they fall in love with each other. But she says, you have to go to my school, because she happens to be a teacher as well. And so the prince goes to the school, and when he talks, obviously when he talks about chapeau instead of chateau, and he talks about his salle à danger instead of salle à manger, all the children are laughing. And what's funny, and what I really like in this book, is that he just gets the words wrong, but he gets the rest right. So when he has an exercise to do in French, all his French is right, except for a couple of words, which makes it hilarious to read. Even in mathematics, instead of saying 4 et 4 font 8, which is 8, he says 4 et 4 font huître, and huître is oyster, so it doesn't mean anything. And I won't spoil the end, but everything goes well for the two of them. Pef wrote a series of books about Le Prince de Motordu and La Princesse des Écoles. It's a fantastic series. It was written, when was this written? I think it was around the 60s. No, 1980. So yeah, it's pretty recent. And I remember them fondly as a child. I loved them. And so there are two things. Either you're reading it with children and they will laugh because they will probably get the jokes. Or if you're just learning French, you can read it and try to get the play on words, which is a very, very big, it can be a big challenge, but the pictures are going to help. For example, it's funny how instead of saying qui va repasser ton linge, which is ironing your clothes, repasser ton linge, his mom says repasser ton singe, which is a monkey. So it's pretty funny, I think. That's La belle l'histoire du prince de Motordu by Pef. Super, super highly recommended. It's very short, so no matter your level, you can give it a try. And one last thing I forgot to say about this book is that the name of the prince is a play on words, obviously. Motordu is just his name, but it means Motordu, which is twisted words. So there's a massive, massive clue in his name, Motordu. I hope I don't lose my wig in the middle of the episode. The second book I wanted to talk about is actually not something I have, but I have a few of the tales. Charles Perrault is our Andersen, our Dickens. So he wrote fairy tales in the 17th century, and what happened is he didn't invent them, but he collected them from the oral tradition. We say la tradition orale, la tradition orale. And he wrote a book with several tales, which is called Les contes de ma mère Loi. Les contes de ma mère Loi. It's a very, very famous book, but now people don't necessarily buy this book. They buy the tales themselves because they're so famous that I'm sure lots of people don't even know they come from this book. So there are several tales. You probably know them because Disney made movies out of them. You have La Belle au Bois dormant, La Belle au Bois dormant, which is the princess who sleeps in her castle. You have Le Petit Chaperon Rouge, Le Petit Chaperon Rouge. You know, it's the red hood little girl who goes in the forest and finds the wolf and delivers her grandmother. And in this book, there's a very, very famous phrase in the popular culture, which is tire la chevillette et la bobinette cher rat. Tire la chevillette et la bobinette cher rat. Now it doesn't mean anything anymore because we're in the 21st century, but before it was how the door opened. And it's funny because it's completely outdated, but it stayed in popular culture. The third tale is Barbe Bleue, who was kind of a ogre, an ogre, who used to maybe eat his wives. I can't even remember. Barbe Bleue. You'll figure it out. The fourth one is Le Chat Botté. Le Chat Botté, you find him in Shrek and other Disney's now. You have Cendrillon, Cinderella, Cendrillon, that you very probably know. And the last one is Le Petit Poucet. Le Petit Poucet is this one, Le Petit Poucet, and he was a very, very tiny boy. He was one of 7 brothers, and he was so tiny that he was called Le Petit Poucet because he was as big as un pouce, so he was called Le Petit Poucet. And you probably know the story. I'm not going to spoil it to you so you can go and read it. But his family was very, very poor. They were lumberjacks. And we call this un bûcheron. Des bûcherons, une famille de bûcherons. And they were very, very poor and they had lots of boys. So they kind of wanted to lose them in the forest to avoid seeing them starve to death. The tales are not very funny. That's for Le Petit Poucet. And the last one that is not in Les Contes de ma mère Loi, but was added later, but was from Charles Perrault as well, is Peau d'Âne. Peau d'Âne, again, not a very fun story. It's about a girl who is the princess, the daughter of a king who had lost his wife, and his wife made him promise to marry a woman more beautiful than herself. So he happened to want to marry his daughter and he has to escape. So again, not very nice, but that's how tales are. They usually want to show you that the world is very, very bad. So that's Peau d'Âne. What's interesting about Peau d'Âne as well is that it was made famous by a movie with Catherine Deneuve when she was super, super young, and the movie is very nice. So you can either read it or watch the movie or both. Peau d'Âne. I want to say one word about Le Père Castor. This book is edited as a series from Les Classiques du Père Castor, and it's a series of tales that were super famous for people my age, because when we were children they were adapted as animated films, dessins animés, as we say in French, des dessins animés, and they were les histoires du Père Castor. And just thinking about it now, I can remember the music of it. I'm not going to sing it now, but you can find them on YouTube. I talked about this in my Salon de Géraldine recently to my students because I was so happy to find them on YouTube, and I recommend it to my students on le Salon de Géraldine, but it's for everybody. So, les histoires du Père Castor, find them for your children, grandchildren, your friends, read them yourself, but you can also watch them on YouTube. They're a fantastic adaptation. Third book I wanted to talk about today is Les Contes de la rue Broca. I love this one so much. Les Contes de la rue Broca. Here you have l'intégrale, which is the whole 13 tales. We say un conte, the third, les 13 contes de la rue Broca. It was written by Pierre Gripari, and illustrated by Claude Lapointe. And the illustrations and the tales were at the same time. So when they came out in 1967, 1967, they were all like that. As a child, I have une édition de poche of Les Contes de la rue Broca, and I remember very, very fondly La sorcière de la rue Mouffetard, which is the first of the 13 contes. La sorcière de la rue Mouffetard, she's a witch, une sorcière in French, and she lives in le quartier des Gobelins à Paris. Le quartier des Gobelins. She was ugly and old, and she wanted to be the most beautiful woman in the world. And one day she was reading le journal des sorcières, and she found an ad saying, Madame, vous qui êtes vieille et laide, vous deviendrez jeune et jolie. Et pour cela, mangez une petite fille à la sauce tomate. Attention, le prénom de cette jeune fille devra obligatoirement commencer par la lettre N. So it means that you lady, you are old and ugly, you want to become young and beautiful. For that, eat a young girl with tomato sauce. But be careful, the first name of this young girl has to start with an N. So she remembers that her young neighbor in La Rue Broca is called Nadia. So I won't spoil you the story, you have to read it to find out what happens. The witch on this cover is La sorcière du placard à balai. La sorcière du placard à balai. You can see her broom here and her placard in the background. Un placard and un balai. What I love about these tales is that they sound like they're happening today. They were written in 1967, which is much more modern than Les Fables de La Fontaine, for example, that we're not going to cover today, or Peau d'Âne, which sounds very, very old. They're all fantastic tales, but this one sounds like they can happen. Also, the place in Paris exists. La Rue Broca exists. It's between the 5th and the 13th arrondissement in Paris. La Rue Mouffetard as well. So you can read the tales and go and take a picture of yourself in this street. Les Contes de la Rue Broca. I couldn't tell you how much I love this book and this author. I'm going to read all of them. I knew a few, honestly, but when I found, when my friend showed me this beautiful edition of the book, I just wanted to read it entirely. So that's for Les Contes de la Rue Broca. That's it for today. If you are a fan of French books, you probably saw that I didn't talk about Les Fables de La Fontaine. This is so important and so big that I will do that in another episode very, very soon, in costume as well. So you can see me with this wig. It's very weird to have hair, I have to say. So tell me now in the comments below the video, what is your favorite tale in French? It can be a translation as well if you found Hansel et Gretel in French and you read it as a child. That counts as well. Try to answer in French so you can practice a little bit. If you want an answer to your question, I highly recommend you comment over communefrancaise.com. If you want more episodes like this on books or any other topics about French culture and French language, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you want my everyday French crash course, which is a fantastic course by email, You can subscribe on commenfrancaise.com. It's a 10-day long, it's a fantastic course that French students love, and it's free. So that's it for today. I hope you like this episode on books. I'm doing a bit more on those recently. If you like them, tell me. I wish you a fantastic day, une bonne journée, and thank you for watching Comme une Française TV. Salut!